May buntag sa inyong tanan. I'd like to thank Father Francisco for inviting me here. I wasn't expecting this huge crowd. I was thinking of, me and a bunch of Jesuits drinking coffee and shooting the breeze. So I'm a little bit apprehensive. It's nice to be back in Ateneo. The last time I was here was after we adopted our daughter from Davao in 2010. My late wife's classmate happened to be Father Cruz in Cornell, so we had one of the best baptisms here. It was like probably 8 Jesuits showed up and blessed my daughter. So it's very nice to be back. I used to date someone from here, but she broke up with me. So Father Francisco asked me to give you an overview of Asia. Caveat: I don't know much about Southeast Asia. I will try my best to think comparatively. Okay. So I think for Asia, we want to think. Well, this is, first thing you have to consider. Okay. I learned this from my. I was an ex-seminarian, so I learned this that I have to talk around. It's easier to get the audience attention instead of everybody falling asleep and looking at their iPad and Facebook. So this is Asia. If you notice, Asia is not just. I'm a moron. It's not working. That's Asia. If you look at Asia, it's not just a house, but I teach a course in Asia, Asia Center, and if you notice, this is quite a big, large community we are here. Okay? I'd like to talk to you guys about 2 contradictions in relation to the topic. The first is, oh gosh, I'm so bad at it. Okay. There's 2 major contradictions I think I'd like us to discuss. The first is, today's Asia has experienced the fastest economic growth in all the regions of the world. People say that this is the Asia century. Okay. There's a reduction in unemployment rate, a reduction in poverty. There's a gradual rise of the middle class in Asia. Yet, at the same time, there's a widening gap between the rich and the poor. In general, 30 to 50% of Asian wealth is controlled by a small elite. The second issue that, I'm sorry, can read it, let me just, the second issue is that economic growth is fast, but at the expense of the environment. If you fly from Thailand across Cambodia today, and just look at the forest, you'll actually watch how the forest has disappeared in the Cambodian Vietnam border. The environmental problem is a big one. The third one is, while we have economic growth, there's actually the danger of a looming unemployment, serious unemployment as a result of the transformation of technology. And the target here, and it's something we have to think about, most of those who will be unemployed in the next 20 or so years will be people in their 20s and 30s. Not as old folks, no? But children and the students we have. Okay. To that economic one, the second one is political. If those of you who were in the 1980s, remember EDSA, there was a surge of democratization all over Asia. Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, I think Taiwan to a certain extent, Indonesia of course. But today, democracy is on a retreat. Okay. All throughout Asia is that autocratic and semi-autocratic regimes, using constitutional means, elections, etc., have taken over power. You have, of course, we have the the familiar guns, guns, and gold, which is how the Philippine politics is defined, but it's not only specific to the Philippines anymore. Indonesian politicians have deployed the same guns and guns and gold that we normally associated with us. So the traditional politicians are in power, but we have a new emerging group of new elites associated with the military, religion, and the old Communist Party. And these regimes are invoking Asian or national values to say, well, stomach first before freedom. But in the 1980s, but today, the argument of Asian values is stomach first, stomach forever, no more freedom. So you cite this from the Philippines, of course, China, Vietnam, North Korea, but you have virtually one-party governments. It's Burma, Cambodia, India, Japan, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Timor-Leste. What I'd like to do today, in the 45 minutes I'm here, is to elaborate on these contradictions and hopefully we can have a fruitful discussion. But a caveat, okay? Here's the caveat. This is the population. Asia's total non-population is 11.9 million square miles. In this area, there are 4.52 billion people, or 59.66% of the global population is in Asia. So if you're a missionary, that's a huge number. Okay? You're not dealing anymore with just small towns. You're dealing here with towns and cities that have exploded because more and more Asians are shifting towards the urban center. Okay? So 49% of Asia's population is growing, which means that we have to reorient the vision. The population in our league of the world, Southeast Asia, is about 640 million. So 8.5% of the global population. I'm sorry I'm going to the statistics because I'm a social scientist. You know, you're stuck with me. The spiritual side, theological side. In Indonesia, it's 256 million. We have 100 million people. Vietnam and Myanmar has 50 million people. And this is the population is expected to reach 800 million in the next 4 decades. Okay? On the contrary, however, this is not a Malthusian nightmare. In fact, in the law of economics of Stein pointing out that there is a steady decline of the population in most of Asia, which is good. Okay. Because it then explains partly the next slide. So, the next slide is this. Okay. In 2015, the World Bank said Asia's overall economic growth is 5.9%. And it would be predicted to go as high as 6.2% in 2018. Asia now accounts for 60% of global growth. Now in comparison, Japan is 3.4%. The United States, 3%. Okay? European Union, 2.5%. You can see this graph. Wait, sorry. So, this is the US. Okay. Europe. This is Asia. So this is really the Asian century. It's something that they have to deal with. Now, if you break into sub-regions, South Asia has the highest GDP growth, 6.9%, and expected to 7.8 to 7.3 by the beginning of this year. Southeast Asia has grown up to 4.9% in 2016, 5.1%, and 5.2% in 2018. And in East Asia, the point that it's now reached 6.6%, with China leading the way, 17.3%. Okay? Productivity is also on the rise. Okay? Again, I'm sorry, I was in a small room, so Asian productivity has run from 13.63% in 2000 to 24.13 to 31.34 in 2015. And in ASEAN, it was 13.42 in 2000, 18.39 in 2010, and 27.87%. So more Asians are producing things. Okay? That's the image we have. In South Asia, it's 14.7. The Indians are doing well. And one thing that's been noticeable is the slide in poverty. I can share the PowerPoint later. There is a noticeable slide in the poverty in Asia. In 1990, 966 million Asians were living below the poverty line, earning $1.90 a day. In 2013, that had gone down to 71 million. So we're getting fatter, so for. In South Asia, 505 million were extremely poor in 1990, but it's gone down to 256, almost by half by 2013. Okay? And finally, the middle class is growing too. The Asian middle class is growing. It's gone up by 13% in South Asia. And this middle class, this Asian middle class, buys a lot. I think credit card is one factor. The World Bank said in 2005 The middle class, the Asian middle class, spent $5 billion, probably cars, etc. In 2020, that went up to $15 billion. We have money. And in 2030, it's expected that Asia's middle class will spend $33 billion. So, the World Bank said, well, it's something to do with the fact that agricultural prices in Asia have gone down, a lot of people are retiring, more people are in schools, but also the most important thing is this. Us. Me. Me and thousands of clients coming back last night at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's always lively to come home with a bunch of Filipinos, because once you go through immigration, everybody starts laughing. And we all start laughing, and everybody starts insulting everybody, and they're like, I'm home. So remittances are a big factor in the growth of the Asian economies. In 2016, 22 countries which had been recipients of $1 billion in remittances, of 22 countries, 8 are from Asia. Okay. The 4 of these countries, 8 countries, are the top 5 beneficiaries of remittances. China, 15.4 billion, India, 10.6 billion, us, 10.5 billion, Vietnam, 6.6 billion, and together with South Korea is 83.3 billion, Thailand is 1.7 billion, Pakistan is 1.33 billion, and Japan, surprisingly, 1.33 billion. Now, Asian remittances constitute 43.5% of the total remittances in 2017. So we're getting rich, money is coming in. In fact, under the light years of the Ateneo government, we're actually lending money to countries. I think it's at reverse now because of build. But growth, rapid industrialization had come at the expense of several things. And the first is this. I don't use PowerPoint for letters, I just show pictures. My students tend to focus on the pictures more rather than the letters. So, if you look at the state of Asian environment, East Asia and the Pacific contribute to 1/3 of the carbon emissions in the world, and 60% of coal consumption. I found this on the internet. This is Borneo. And these are all the areas that are in danger because of deforestation, smoke, and everything. We are here. We're very red. And if you notice this, I was actually in Borneo in 2000, and it's so depressing to know that in 2010, it was it. And those of you who come from province, of course, I grew up in a sunny city. It was a rainforest in 1965. My father used to eat monkeys and sawak, And now it's nothing. Everybody it's desert in the top. So East Asia, Vietnam and Thailand has lost 43% of their forest covers in the last 4 decades. Vietnam said, well, it's necessary, it's industrial evil because it earned $2.4 billion in income. But not so. The long-term effect is horrible. Mumbai, megacities like Mumbai and Beijing have been blanketed with smoke. Those of you who went to Beijing, remember? I was in Guangzhou 2 years ago, and the only time I saw the sun in the 6 years days we were there was on the day we arrived. And the rest was. So 33 countries, 30 of the 30 countries in Asia have become vulnerable to climate change because of this expanding environmental nightmare. So if you factor in Asia as bearing the brunt of the 70%, if you add to the environmental issue the fact that Asia bears the brunt of 70% of the world's natural disasters, then what we see is running parallel with this economic growth is this growing environmental nightmare. So China and Japan have instituted measures to curb carbon emission, rehabilitate ecologies, and develop alternative sources of energy. China is really big into solar energy now.
But from an Asian perspective, this leaves much to be desired, and the positive result is probably seen only in our great-grandchildren's time. Otherwise, it's a Blade Runner. So unemployment has gone down. But if you break it down by age, the figures show that those who are regularly unemployed are young Asians. Okay? After the financial crisis in 1996, youth unemployment, okay, in Southeast Asia alone, 60% of Indonesians of lower skill in the auto industry lost their jobs, and 73% of higher. So the older you are, okay, younger you are, there's the prospect of you losing occupation. The Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam will have to fire 60% of, sorry. Okay, yeah. Page 9. There you go. Sorry. So in Southeast Asia, after the financial crisis, people who are 18 to 25 in age in Southeast Asia, unemployment for these people had gone up by 17%, with Indonesia highest at 20%, and us actually at 15%. So they were tracking where these people are finding their jobs, and they were all found in temporary and part-time jobs and blue-collar worker, which means that the prospect of them increasing their pay, getting health benefits and medical benefits, and even retirement are very poor. What's more bothering, however, is that it's inherent in the capitalist system that you have to improve. And one of the things, you improve in two things. You look for sources of cheap labor in China, but you also improve technologically. And this is one thing that is happening all over Asia now. The shift towards automation and robotics. Okay? Now, you can refer about the portable gun, the dog of Japan running around. You also have, those of you been to Japan, you have to go to this robot hotel. It's not humans anymore who are running the hotel, it's robots. It's an interesting case. But it also has a scary prospect because China, for example, has pursued robotics, the shift to robotics by 240%. Vietnam, 211%. The Philippines, 106%. Well, 86%. And Malaysia, 56%. Now, these are the fastest growing countries in Asia. Okay? So, economists are starting to worry that this technological revolution would displace 12 to 17 million workers in Southeast Asia alone. 60% of the Indonesians, 70% of Thai. The Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam will have to fire 60% of its workforce in the electronic and electronic industries once automation comes to full force. The use of computers, for example, will reduce the cost of clients of business processing sources by 60%, but at the expense of 89% of Filipinos being kicked out of their jobs. And there is now automation has spread in the retail trade, Amazon.com, and the International Labor Organization predicts that 68% of Thai workers will lose their jobs, 71% of Cambodians, and 85% of Indonesians, and 88% of Filipinos. Sarili lang ito, no? Okay? And over and above that, you have this. Okay, yeah. I found this in the internet too. This gives you an idea of how many people will be displaced by robots. China is small, but it's rising fast. And the other problem is Bhutan. Most of you are probably maxed your credit card, no? Very normal these days. Now, indebtedness has gone up. Okay? If you notice, these are household debts. These are non-financial corporate debts. And if you will notice, corporate debts have gone up and up. Okay? It's not corporate debts, families, schools, institutions that are going up, but so are high-school debts in China, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. And this is worse in our case. Okay? Again, corporate debt. Philippines growing. Singapore. So more and more Asians are starting to experience, to go through debt, a debt livelihood, which used to be the character and habit of Americans. Now we're joining the race. Look at this. Again, if you notice, these are the corporate debts, these are household debts, individual, and individual. So, palaki na palaki yung utang natin, next story. And that is a problem in the long term because we always know that growth cannot be sustained by just continuously borrowing money. So the more problematic is this. The contrast between Asia's rich and poor. In 1990, the Gini coefficient rose in Asia at an annual rate of 1.4%, from 0.39 in the 1990s and 0.46 in 2000. The Asian Development Bank listed 14 of 37 economies having in Asia now having a Gini coefficient of 0.4, which the ADB considers as quote-unquote high inequality. In China, it has gone from worse, from 32.4 in 1990 to 43.4 in 2008. And in India, risen from 29.2 in 1990 to 37% in 2010. So more and more, as economic growth has developed, more and more people, less and less people are coming into control of the nation's wealth. And as long as there's steady little bit, becoming quite observable now if you land in airports all over Asia. Yeah, here's another example. Again, if you want the PowerPoint, I think Dr. Manoli would be happy to share it with you. And of course, our favorite topic, corruption. Transparency International ran a survey a year ago, 22,000 people, asking them which countries are the most corrupt. 70% China, of course, and Thailand was the last place. We're here. Sorry.
Not available.
We're not included. And I'm trying to figure it why. And it's probably because Transparency International closed its office here. And when I went to the website and tried to figure out, and then they say they closed their office. That's here. So we are incorrect. I'm correct. So, but consider this: for the 100 most corrupt countries in the world, okay, the 100 most corrupt countries in the world, it won't fit my PowerPoint. If you look at it, okay, 15 come from East, South, and Southeast Asia. Okay? So, government may have spurred growth, people may be losing jobs, but environments are being destroyed, but also corruption is going up. And there we are, North Korea, of course, famous for making fake dollars. Cambodia, the forest, Myanmar, Laos. Look at that. Surprisingly, India is not that corrupt. Now, so this economic picture I'm trying to project, it's a little bit depressing. And there's hope, okay? One more depressing part, politics. Okay? This is my area of study. So what's the state of politics and democracy in Asia? Okay. I tried to divide the different countries, governments of Asia, into what I call, as political scientists call regime types. So if you'll notice, the only democracies are South Korea and Taiwan. At least they beat up each other in parliament proceedings. But one-party governments, different. Okay?
Mike, please.
So if you notice, one-party government, which means, you have Cambodia, China, you range from the most authoritarian to actually the most quote-unquote seemingly democratic. Okay. UMNO has been in control of Malaysia in 1946, military of course, North Korea. Singapore has one People's Action Party since 1949. Vietnam for the Communist Party. Monarchies for heaven's sake. That's supposed to be destroyed in the 1770s, the French Revolution. No. There are monarchies running Brunei and Thailand. Okay? Political dynasty, of course, us, but also Brunei. Family owns the place, no? I'm sorry. Thailand, if you look at a couple of my colleagues are studying Thai history outside of Bangkok, very much similar to ours. Timor is run by a families associated with Frelimo, and military role in Burma, Pakistan, and Thailand. These are regimes that operate invoking religion as a source of legitimacy. Communist system, others live out. Okay. So this is the state of politics in Asia. Okay. The one prominent thing about Asian politics also is personality cult. A strong presence of personalism in the way leaders are projected. So King Bhumibol of Thailand, for example, has been respected, has transformed himself from a kid who went to Switzerland to study, becoming king, and is now praises the god king. You also have Thaksin Shinawatra, who tried to compete with the king and was kicked out. But then you have people like Jokowo, not here, who rose in the basis of being young and corrupt, and of course the deification recently of Comrade C. He is now president for life. And all of them are this. It's the only thing I write something. Okay? They have got alien influences, alien regard, okay? They have enemies, but they have compulsion for control. And all of them invoking protecting the nation. So, except, for example, they also have the third thing is this folks have mass appeal. Okay? And because they are able to form multi-class coalitions, making the poor believe that they are one with them, but while assuring the elite and the middle classes in Asia that their economic interests will be protected. So, for example, in Thailand, Thaksin was famous for the 1 baht primary care. You have to do, if you have 1 baht, you go to a clinic and you pay, that's all you pay. But he also, much of his money, has been used to purchase for football teams. He was able to do that because he had control of the telecommunications industry. They appropriate slogans coming in mainly from the left. Now think of Duterte, I'm a socialist. No? But they also have this propensity to use violence, which is characteristic of right-wing politics. And where politics is framed by religions, all populists tap on the theological prejudices of people to repress what they consider threat groups. Okay? Human rights advocate, so most of these regimes target both people. First, human rights advocates, okay, and defenders of fundamental freedoms. Second are political opposition, members of the political opposition. Third are criminals, quote unquote. And fourth are minorities. So, for example, in Bangladesh and parts of Burma, you've heard of how Muslim minorities have been attacked and attacked by majority. The majority is backed up by the government. You have the same thing in Mindanao, but you also have the same thing in Thailand. Muslim countries, however, have also done the same thing. So in Malaysia, for example, there is now a move to make the Sharia the basis of governance. There is a push in Indonesia by different Islamic movements to require government officials to be Muslims, not somebody, and not of no other religion. So there is a great series of attacks in all these places. All you have to do is Google Bangladesh, the Philippines, to Taiwan, even Japan. Japan has actually become more and more restrictive of immigrants, people coming in. So these are the people, sent targets of violence, but the poor, the minority, the oppressed, and actually the defenders of freedom are the most frequent targets of all these regimes, ranging from President Duterte to Prime Minister Hun Sen to the Indian government. And most of the time, they don't use violence actually, they use the law. Okay. So if you're looking at the Sharia, the circus in Congress now against Chief Justice Sereno, it's common in most of Asia. The law is being invoked in order to silence people. So in Malaysia, for example, the Malaysian government has reinstituted, resurrected the old colonial laws, Anti-Sedition Act, in order to go after small opposition movements, small groups, opposition groups demanding for greater democratization. And of course, you have the Burmese military. Now, one problem about this is that you are already faced with regimes that are autocratic and powerful. But the other side is that we have one problem. The people opposed to these kinds of repressive regimes are almost always divided. Okay? Globalization has given these regimes the basis to say, well, we can feed our population, let's do away with Christian democracy. In fact, look at the United States, 3%. Okay? But on the other hand, people who have been able to push back have been limited by the following. Extreme division, civil society organizations tend to be more and more specific, issue-specific. Second, the actually absence of any idea, any perspective that wants to change things globally, not socially. I mean, the communists used to do this. Okay? So there is no more that kind of ideology or philosophy that says it's kind of order that's not good, we have to replace it with something. But the third thing that you have to consider also is that because of globalization, these regimes have taken over the power of technology in order to compete and neutralize the opposition. Think of fake news, for example. Okay. And finally, these South Asian regimes are able to do what they're doing because you have a similar trend towards autocracy, a neo-authoritarianism in places like the United States. In centers of democracy, for example, you have President Trump. It's classic, given, and part of this has to do with the fact because 60% of Americans don't vote. They don't really care. And so you have this use of fake news combining with depoliticization of communities that weakens the way in which people involved in correcting these injustices, preventing the spread of this kind of autocratic rule from spreading. And most of the time, when I talk to my students about it, everybody's depressed. Oh my God, I'm not going to just get rich. But consider, and I'll close with this, but consider the many instances in which society said, enough. Think of EDSA. Okay? Somebody shoots President Ateneo, over a million came out. Think of even the homecoming of Khomeini in Iran. When he went home, the Shah collapsed. Think of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there are different instances in our history where people say, enough. Okay, enough, let's change the way things are. And I think our role as intellectuals, as academics, activists, missionaries, is to anticipate that event from happening. And this combines what Father Alejo told me, a combination of rigorous understanding of society and also a firm grasp and persistence of our moral compass. And yun na, maraming salamat.